The session that you, oh, it's recording. The session you have joined this morning is titled Building Effective Lines of Communication with Families of Children with Disabilities. And our presenter this morning is Ms. Cheryl Fitz. And Cheryl Fitz serves as the Office of Special Education Services, Family and Community Engagement Liaison. She has supported children with disabilities and their families as an educator and consultant at both the government and school level for 25 years. Her expertise and relationship building help to implement and maintain district and state special education initiatives. As the former Office of Special Education Services Ombudsman, Cheryl's knowledge on informal dispute resolution and the importance of clear, purposeful communication in school-family relationships continues to undergird her work. And I am going to go ahead and hand it over to Ms. Fitz. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to place those in the chat box.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm really excited about the opportunity to be sharing with you guys. And I do want this to be as interactive as possible. So please put your thoughts, your questions in the chat. And let's just sort of have a conversation today. So we're going to start. I'm just going to give you a brief overview of our agenda. We're going to be talking about partnerships and relational trust and clear, purposeful communication with families of children with disabilities in particular. And interwoven will be basic principles surrounding communication and building relationships upon mutual respect and trust. So we're going to start with a few things for you to ponder, some things for you to be thinking about. I know the session that we just had with our keynote speaker was awesome. It gave us a lot to think about when we're talking about our children that we're serving. And I want us to think now for a minute about the needs of our families, particularly the families of children with disabilities. What do you think the families need? And what are their concerns? And while you are thinking about that, I also want you to be thinking about what your role will be when it comes to partnering with families of children with disabilities. And as you ponder, I'm going to start this video. This video will enable you to hear the voices of the families themselves. And I want us to start thinking about the people that we're serving.
When you're at a grocery store or something and they see this kid throwing a temper tantrum, they just think, oh, these are bad parents. And I just wish they knew the struggle that we went through. Like, they have no idea what we go through.
We didn't know about Zach or his condition or anything about him until the day he was born.
Zach was born with a rare syndrome called TAR syndrome.
He was diagnosed with Down syndrome at birth. It was one of those things where the doctor kind of gives you a choice whether you want to keep the baby or not. And I was absolutely devastated because I thought that was like the most horrific thing you could ever tell a mother in third trimester.
Our son Jacob has autism. I could not say the word autism for a couple of years, actually. It was really hard for me to accept that diagnosis.
I can vividly remember him laying on the table, looking at his little short arm. That day was the hardest day that I'll ever go through.
The second that Zach was born, we were researching everything that we could possibly find. We had this baby boy that we had no idea what to do with at the time. You know, how to give him a bath. Little things that any parent would go through with a newborn. We had to rethink every single one of them.
In the beginning, you don't know anything. How long is it going to take him to talk? How long is it going to take him to walk? How long is it going to take him to be able to use the bathroom independently? All of those things, you just go one day at a time.
I always tell people, like, until you're directly involved in it, you don't really get it.
At first, I was just like, why did this happen to me? You know, but now I look at him, he's just an awesome kid.
King Yari is absolutely resilient. We knew that from birth that he was going to have.
Sorry, guys. I was trying to mute my background here.
to have an open heart surgery. You would never even think for 1 second that this is the same kid that either is about to go through surgery or just came out of surgery. Because he's always happy and generally in a good mood, he puts me in check.
There were so many things that we cried about, things that he would never ever be able to do. And starting at about a month old, Zach was just checking those things off the list. They made his first set of prosthetics just for standing. We practically broke those things because he was trying to walk all over the place.
A couple years ago, he was able to teach him to ride a
Yeah.
bike.
At first, Jacob didn't like riding the bike. He was kind of out of control. He didn't know what he was doing. A couple days later, he came up to me and he said, "Dad, bike." And man, that was just awesome. We took the training wheels off. He's riding a bike with a special needs kid. A lot of people think, oh, he can't do it. You can't just say, oh no, he can't do it. Get him out there and try.
If you're raising a kid with special needs, don't dwell on the stuff that you don't think they can do, because they're gonna write their own book.
Now, instead of saying, why did I get a special needs kid? The question is, how did we get so lucky?
Everyone always says, oh, Zach's so blessed to have you guys as parents, and completely opposite. We're blessed to have Zach.
My advice to parents going through the same thing that we are, try to be patient. Try not to treat your kid differently.
Always have the highest expectations for your child. Be proud of the kids that you have. For whatever reason, they were gifted to you, and to just, really appreciate that gift and see the positive in it at all times.
The advice I would give would be just keep your faith that you can do it. We all have challenges as human beings, but being a mother has been the best reward I've ever received. I'm just grateful to have my kid as is. He's amazing.
So parent voice, I really enjoyed what the parents were sharing. And when you think about their needs and their concerns, what came to your mind? What thoughts came to your mind when you were listening to them? Can you share that in the chat with us? Just anything that kind of came to mind as you were listening to what they were saying. I know when they were talking, I wrote down some things that was said. They said, "I just wish they knew the struggle we go through." I was devastated. And that was the hardest day I'd ever go through. Those kind of expressions just emanate emotion. It's a very emotional time in your life when you first find out about it, as you go through it, as your child is developing, going through different stages, and you're trying to figure out what's happening. It's an emotional roller coaster. And then they said, well, don't dwell on what you think they can't do. Don't just say he can't do it. Get him out there and try, and have the highest expectations for your child. As an ombudsperson and as a teacher in special education, that was something I think that frustrated the parents that I work with the most, when they felt like the teachers or the administrator or the therapist wouldn't even try. They wouldn't let the child even try to do or to go beyond where they were. And that was frustrating, because they want the highest possible level that their child can reach. Some other things that kind of stood out to me was, don't treat your child differently. Appreciate the gift, see the positive, keep the faith, because we all have challenges. And I think parents aren't looking, well, I know parents aren't looking for pity or sympathy, but they are looking for understanding. And they know their child's limitations, but still want them to achieve their full potential. So those are some things that we could be pondering as we're going forth and as we're continuing thinking about our families and thinking about our role in partnering with our families. And I see we do have some responses in the chat, but I can't see what those are. Martha, can you share some of that with us?
Of course. We have several comments. One is I am in a unique position because I interpret for IEPs and I have a special needs child. I think knowing they are not alone at fault or that their child will fail in school. And then another comment, having a special needs nephew, I can relate to the stares and whispers as to why the child isn't under control.
Mhm.
And let's see here. I have to always explain and advocate for my son who has overcome many obstacles. And even children that aren't special needs but struggle in an area like reading is very difficult for the parents to face and know what to do with. And lastly, they shared not only their struggles in the video, but also the beauty in having a child with a disability.
Thank you. Thank you. Those are some great comments, and I really appreciate you being open and sharing some of your experiences. And I too actually have a grandson who has a disability. He's diagnosed with autism and intellectual disability. So I understand that part of it as well. So I really appreciate your comments. And yes, we do want to think beyond what we see. We want to challenge our students, our children, and we want to support and partner with our families. So when we talk about partnering, what should family partnership look like? What would you like to see? I mean, if you could put it into one or two sentences, what would it look like for you, partnering? Well, I like the description given by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services here. And there are a couple of words that stand out to me. And let's see if these words stand out to you as well. In family partnerships, program staff and families build ongoing, reciprocal, and respectful relationships. Program staff value unique expertise about their children. Staff engage in regular communication with families to understand their goals for their children and themselves and work toward those goals together. So while schools hold the primary responsibility for creating these family-school partnerships, little can be done without reciprocity or relationships. Little can be done without respect. And so those things kind of stood out to me and I love this quote. I think it's ideal. It's ideal when we think about partnerships and what we truly want it to look like. And we have to communicate. We have to show respect for one another. We have to see the other side, take the other perspective. So I wanted to give you some examples of school partnership. And I actually pulled these from anonymous surveys that we give our parents on an annual basis now. And they have an opportunity to comment. So one of the parents said, "My son has a wonderful, intelligent team who work closely with our family to make sure he has everything he needs to succeed. They go above and beyond for my child to get the best education possible, all while showing him love and respect." I chose this one in particular because it talks about team effort. It talks about family involvement. It talks about working together and that respect that not only shown for the family, but for the child as well. And the other one says, "All of my students' needs have been addressed, and our teacher and administration are continuing to help my special needs child thrive. We consider ourselves blessed with such an amazing team at a school who promotes inclusivity." So I chose this one because it's obviously not just the IEP team, but it's the administration, not an administrator, but the administration of the school itself. And they are on the same page. They want this child to thrive. So at the same time, I was really glad to see and know that we have some great partnership going on in the state. I wanted to show you as well some non-examples. And I think some of you may be able to relate to this. It says, unless you're an IEP mom, you have no idea what it's like to dread every single interaction you have with the school. And I know that you kind of get this knot in the pit of your stomach because you don't know what's happening. And that's definitely not what we want when we think about partnerships. It said the daily planner with the list of things that the kid did wrong and nothing in 12 days of what they did well. So I had even messaged the teacher this AM saying handle with care. That to me is an definite example of a lack of communication. There's no reciprocity in that at all. Yes, they have a planner. Yes, there's something being communicated from the teacher or the school to the family. However, it's all one-sided. Why is the school not seeing the positive? So that in itself is frustrating, I would think. And so we know our kids have issues. I know what each of my kids brings and doesn't bring to the classroom, but let's help them grow together. My kids haven't even been around other kids for almost 3 years. And it's why we put in an extensive reintegration plan. So the worst comment one day was, she is fidgeting with her fidget toy. I am done. Can I get an amen from anybody? I would be done as well. They started out so well. They knew the needs of the child, the children, they knew the strengths, they knew their areas of need. They set out to do an extensive reintegration plan. And then it just fell flat. And it fell flat possibly because of a lack of communication, because there was not that reciprocity, of that understanding of what we mean by partnership. So we have to build authentic relationships. Yes, there was communication. With the examples that I showed you earlier of partnership, you could hear the communication, you could hear the relationship that had been formed and that they had maintained. And so when you're building authentic relationships, it's something that you want to do. It shows respect. You're valuing the other person, and that person is valuing you as well and your input. And I love this quote as well because it talks about meaningful actions and a need to follow up. I mean, how often have our families been in an IEP meeting or just a meeting with the administration or teachers just in general, and there are decisions made, but then there's no follow-up. I mean, you can't build authentic relationships like that. And creating these authentic relationships begins with authentic communication. So I want to start by just giving you some ideas of how you can initiate these authentic relationships because they are extremely important. The first thing I want to say is become asset-minded. Think partnership. What can the student do? So just like you are an expert when it comes to educational or family engagement practices, your families are the expert when it comes to their child and their family's needs. So families need to feel seen and heard in order to become active stakeholders in their child's learning. So think partnership, think asset. Next, connect on a personal level. You can help your families get to know you as a person by sharing parts of your story with them. And the same as a parent. You can help the school get to know you as a person by sharing parts of your story. So you can relate on that personal level. And it doesn't have to be anything really in depth, just sort of make that initial connection and keep that momentum going. You can talk about why you became an educator, or you could talk about just what it's like the day-to-day having a child with a disability. And this kind of builds trust and understanding, and it would encourage both parties to share. So while you may not be able to connect oftentimes face-to-face, especially now, even though things are getting better, you could share digitally. You could share maybe some digital family photos, or if you're a teacher or a parent liaison, you could do a short video explaining who you are and why you do what you do. It's just a basic opportunity to share and connect. Something else you can do to maintain this positive communication, you can send shout outs. Send out some shout outs about student successes. You can help families feel more positive that way. And you're more likely to engage, and the families are more likely to engage in the learning process and at the school when they know that you see more than the negative, you see more than what the child may be lacking, or the area they may be lacking in. You actually see the strengths, you actually see the whole child. So that's a great way to maintain some communication. Then trust the intentions of the teacher, trust the intentions of the parent, because these are challenging times. And, you know, relationships, especially now, building relationships takes time. And as challenges arise, you know, with different things happening in our life daily, as these challenges arise, we have to remind ourselves of the commonality that's there, that both of you, the teacher, the family liaison, the family, both of you want the child to do well. You want the child to succeed. And so keep that in mind whenever things aren't going quite as you thought they should. Trust the intention of the other person. I also want to encourage you to ask for input. Ensure families feel included in the learning process by asking questions, soliciting full feedback, and yes, please follow through. So if families give you feedback, listen to that, see how you can incorporate their ideas or the knowledge that they've shared with you. Get questions about their culture. What is it like at home? Ask them what they expect from you. Again, that's that reciprocity that we talked about before. It's a great way to initiate those authentic relationships. So I think I went backwards. Hold on a second. I did. Okay, so I also want to share this with you as well. And if you have any ideas, if you have any more suggestions, especially my families who are here in the call, if you have any more suggestions as to how we can initiate those positive relationships, you know, please put that in the chat. I'd really like to hear what you have to say. So this part, family communication do's. So you want to protect, you want to cultivate these relationships, right? So you can incorporate these practices into your communication efforts. Other than, you know, using a variety of methods, you know, to communicate, you want to be sure to invite all your families to every event. So I think oftentimes because a family has a child with a disability, we may assume that someone else is sending that information out, but don't assume that. Be sure to invite all your families to every event. And when you do, describe potential modifications or talk about the program environment, you know, invite the families to request certain things so they can participate. You want to make sure that any barriers to their participating is gone, if at all possible, right? So even during the event, don't let it drop. We're still following through, right? So check in with the families during the events. You want to be sure that there's no unanticipated barriers to their full participation. You want to be sure to follow up again. So if anything arose, you could address it at that time. Then I want to ask you to maintain confidentiality. I think this kind of goes without saying for the most part, but it's just like a reminder. Sometimes I think we get really comfortable, but remember that the children are receiving special education services more than likely. They may have a 504 plan. There could be medical diagnoses. All of this is protected information. So if when your families come out to different events or something you have at the school or something in the community, you want to make sure that that information is kept private. So you can even ensure that when you're talking with them in a public setting, that you're not sharing, you know, private information in that setting. I also want to ask you to use language that focuses on the student's abilities. It doesn't mean that you can't acknowledge their challenges, but I think the language that you use when you're talking about a student is high priority. As a parent, I would think that how you say what you say is often interpreted so that the family, I'm kind of talking from my perspective as well, the family gets an idea of what you really think, you know, how you really feel about the situation, about my child, you know, et cetera. So that's something I found out also as an ombudsperson, where I had an opportunity to help families and school districts reconnect to reestablish those positive working relationships. So I want to give you a couple more helpful hints. I know I'm doing a lot of talking, but I wanted to share with you as much as I could. Some other helpful hints when you're provide training for staff, those close to you, as well as anyone who the family may come in contact with, say at an event or in the school setting, et cetera. Let them know about the accommodations. You want to create this inclusive environment so that the family is comfortable. Consider the times. If you are the one making the planning for the event, consider the times that is being offered. Get input from your families about the best time for them. Because remember that sometimes families with children with disabilities, they have a greater difficulty getting time off from work or school, or they may need that time off for certain appointments. So get input from your families before making plans if you can. And then address any concerns that the families of students with disabilities have in a direct and constructive manner. Don't take offense. I want to say this, please don't take offense to questions. Remember, our families are trying to figure out the best way to help their child succeed, right? In an environment that more than likely is not designed for them. So please don't take offense when they start asking questions. Just answer the question, and you know, as directly as you can. So let's do some don'ts. Aren't as many don'ts here, but just want to say I wanted to point out the professional jargon. We sometimes get so hooked on what I call educationese, you know, just this alphabet soup of acronyms. While many parents may have been within special education or the school education environment for a while, they may have heard these acronyms. It doesn't mean that you just use them constantly. I would suggest that you say the whole thing, say what the acronym stands for. Oftentimes, I think just that in itself can help. I want to say don't talk incessantly. Keep an eye on the volume that you do talk with. Sometimes when people think that there's a misunderstanding, they tend to talk louder, thinking that that's going to help. And oftentimes that doesn't help. But another thing, when I say don't talk incessantly, I mean, we want to hear from our families. We want to get their input. So give them that opportunity, right? Give them the opportunity to share. And that's an opportunity for you to learn. That's another opportunity for you to build that relationship and build trust with your families. I'd say don't continually interrupt a parent. I know oftentimes that we have certain things that we want to take care of. We want to make sure that the parents are there and the information you want to share with your parents are given at that time, but give them an opportunity to talk. Even if parents kind of go off the topic at hand a little bit, continue to listen, and then guide them back to the topic at hand. Don't assume. That's like number one. Don't assume. Carefully consider your parents' point of view and background before and during a conversation. So I think with these guidelines in mind, it will strengthen your partnership with parents, and you can begin to work together. You can provide that skillful support that's needed for the students. So again, I want to share with you just briefly about some common barriers. Now, I've been talking about communication, some things you can do to initiate some some things you can do to initiate some authentic relationships. But there are also some common barriers to forming these relationships and creating reciprocity with our families. From the educator or professional perspective, there's a lack of preparation in building these relationships or going beyond what I call an honorable mention. In other words, we are talking about the importance of inclusiveness and diversity, but we're failing to give our staff the tools and direction they need to make it happen. We may also hold expectations for family engagement that very simply just is not realistic. And this is where knowing your people, your community that you're serving is imperative. Oftentimes we want people to do as we would in those circumstances, but that's unrealistic. That's not possible. Remember that the parent who said, I just wish they knew the struggle. Well, even if you have a child with a disability, the struggle can be as unique for you as for that child. So just be aware of that and be thinking about that when we're talking about expectations for family engagement. Talk with your families, find out, get families of children with disabilities to the table and find out exactly how you can break down those barriers. There are also barriers among family members, and this could result from those negative experiences with school partnerships, like the non-examples that I shared with you, or just school in general. I think from my experience in working with other families, there are often feelings of families feeling like they and their child are unwanted and that they are unheard, that they are unvalued. So that's something that's definitely a barrier, but that is again where their relationship building comes to play and the listening comes to play. So we also want to be able to face our biases. I mean, we all have them, right? So face those biases that you may have and make changes. It does require some self-reflection, learning more about our families, but we can bring this together. We can do this together with some self-reflection, some program self-assessments, and determine what practices may actually be keeping our families, out of the school building or away from our events. Also, this is a quote by Karen Mapp. She and her colleagues created the dual capacity framework that's used and promoted by U.S. Department of Ed. And one of the things she said, one of the things many people said is actually born out of the research, and is that relationship, the development of relational trust between home and school is key for any other partnership work to actually take place. I think trust is key. Can I get an amen in the audience? I think trust is key when we're talking about communicating and overcoming barriers. So I want us to take just a minute and do a little self-assessment. Now, I know we have families in the group here, but do a little self-assessment, see how you fit as well. Now, the questions are mainly geared toward professionals, people who are reaching out to families. So what, as a family member, note how many times you answer yes to these questions when you're thinking about interactions that you've had with school or therapists or other professionals, working with your child. So question 1, am I seeking input from, and do I listen to and value what all families have to say? Yes or no? And ask the family, were you sought after for input? Did you feel valued? Did you feel heard? Next question, am I demonstrating to all families that I am competent and that I see them as competent and valuable caretakers or parents? Am I demonstrating to all families that I am competent and that I see them as competent and valuable? Do I keep my word with families? And do I show families that I value and care about them as people? So I'd like for you to put in the chat how many yeses you gave yourself. 4 questions. How many yeses did you give yourself? When we're talking about relational trust, it's rooted in these 4 key elements. It's really rooted in respect, integrity, competence, and personal regard. So how would you rate yourself in this? The first question, can anyone guess what this first question is assessing? It's assessing respect. When you seek out input, when you listen, when you value what they have to say, you're showing respect. What about the second one? Am I demonstrating to all families that I'm competent and that they're competent? Well, that's kind of easy. The question answered itself. Okay, you're assessing competence there. What about, do I keep my word with families? That's integrity. And that's highly important with any relationship, that you do indeed keep your word, that you don't just say what you think you want someone to hear, but you actually keep your word. And the last one is personal regard. Are you showing families that you value and care about them as people? So how did we do? Did you guys do pretty well in this one?
We have Ms. Johnson. She had a 4.
Cool. Wow. I don't think we can beat that, Ms. Johnson. And one thing too I like about assessments, for those areas where you didn't give yourself yeses, now you have an idea of, what to work on. So I'm going to give you some more strategies to consider. You want to be clear, be clear what you know and share that. Help to bring useful information to parents. You want to be ready to listen. We talked about listening quite a bit. Listening and affirming someone's situation can go a long way. You want to watch your assumptions. We always need to bring cultural humility to our work, but be aware of your assumptions and how they impact your relationship. And you want to honor limits. Families have needs and they may need to set limits right now. So be open to that and honor those limits. You want to take the time to form those relationships that we talked about, and you want to open doors. You want to enable family members to get involved in school, class, community activities. You want to think about accommodations that may be needed so they can be involved. So those are some things, some strategies that you can consider. So this entire time, of course, we've been talking about families and children with special needs, and it surrounds building positive connections with these families. Relational trust that we've been discussing is crucial. Disabilities, as we said, impact families different ways. And it's not always understood by those who are helping to meet those needs. So supporting their child means doing whatever is necessary to make sure that their child gets what he or she needs. So families actually can experience quite a bit of emotions. Acceptance is crucial, particularly for those who have children with special needs, because you are understanding them, not only the child, but understanding them as a family and understanding that they are unique. These families can experience, as I said before, a wide range of emotions. The stress level can be higher, and it's often accompanied by a higher level of concern for the child's well-being. So these are things for you to remember when you're interacting. Something else to keep in mind are the various roles that parents are taking on when they have a child with a disability. They have to have specialized knowledge, especially in working with special education. They need specialized knowledge for special education regulations, for therapies that the children are receiving, and then just basic daily living. It requires more effort and attention for the child to do just basic things. And one thing I wanted to point out as well, because we're talking about the whole family, and many of us are in education, or your child is in the educational realm. So much like parents, the siblings are also experiencing a range of feelings. They often have to become more responsible. They have to become independent earlier. Some take on additional roles, so when you're talking about the family, be thinking about their siblings as well. It is unique, but especially if you are in the educational setting and a child whose sibling may have a disability, it's important, I think, that you connect with them as well and make them feel comfortable. Now, I was going to share with you a video. It's a very short video, but I'm not sure if we have time for this one.
Yeah, before we jump into the video, we have about 5 minutes left.
Okay.
We're at the 40-minute mark. And so we have about 5 minutes left, and then we'll take a few questions at the end. So we should have time for the video.
Okay. Actually, no. I don't know. The video is pretty short, 5 minutes. Let me see what I want to talk about in 5 minutes. I'm going to leave this for the end. If we have time, we'll come back to the video. Hold on. So these are some points for you to remember. Make it easy for family members to get involved. Think beyond parents and respect the culture and honor their limits. So I want to get into the communication part of it. Now, this is just some things that will help you when you're connecting with families of children with disabilities, or just in general. Martha, would you read this slide for us?
Communication is a walk in the park.
Thank you. Now, did she read that correctly, guys? Yes? No? What's missing?
I see it now.
You see it now.
Oh, wow.
Yes. You know what happens? We tend to, everyone, we just sort of tend to ignore what we consider to be unnecessary information. Like, that's not supposed to be there. It's like our minds automatically fix it, right? So we generally just don't pay attention to what we believe is unimportant. But that's a big part about communication. We want to pay attention to what's happening. Communication is imparting and exchanging information, and it's making a connection. Now, this is from an unknown author. It says, I know that you believe you understand what you think I said, but I'm not sure you realize that what you heard is not what I meant. Huh? Is that not confusing? There's no connection there. Okay, we don't quite understand exactly what he's talking about. And if there's no connection, there's no communication. So whose responsibility is it then truly for this communication? According to this person, he's only responsible for saying what he says, not for you understanding what he says. But when we want to connect with people, when we want to make those relationships, this cannot be a part of what we do. Communication is only 7% spoken word. There's 38% tone, there's 55% body language. So when you're looking at our daily lives, 70% is spent communicating, but of those 70%, 45% is listening. And that leads us to somewhat of a quandary, because we actually think faster than we speak. The average person speaks up to 175 a minute, but we hear or we listen 400 to 500 words a minute. That's why you can listen to me, play music in the background, hear the siren going down the street, because we hear more. But when someone's talking and you're impatient, so your mind can travel. So listening, however, is key, right? And when communicating with families with children with disabilities, listening is not just understanding the words of the questions asked. Listening is understanding why the question was asked in the first place. So I wanted to point out to you guys that this is crucial. I also wanted to talk to you about listening to the cues that come in a conversation. Some of you may be a little about how to refer to a child. Do you say your child has dyslexia, or your child is dyslexic? Just kind of listen to the cues, and that would help you. So I know we're running out of time, but I want to share with you, and I'm going to share this in the link. Oh, can I give you the link? Yes, I can give you the link. There is a quiz that kind of talks about our dominant communication styles, and considering the need of each person's communication style, it yields a greater chance of establishing that rapport.
We are
These are
at,
your, okay, thank you. Yeah, these
my
are your
apologies.
these are your 4 communication style characteristics, and we can talk about that at a later time. Can I just finish here? I'm going to do one more
Yes,
thing.
we have about 5 more minutes, and then we'll wrap it up.
Okay, I'm going to skip through here, and I do have a link in case you guys want to take the quiz and find out what your major communication style is. And I wanted to share with you just some resources, let you know there's some resources here that will help you connect with your families. There's a module here by Iris, collaborating with families with students with disabilities, which I think is excellent. And there's working with families with children with special needs, a virtual lab school. So it's another way for you to get some information about that. And I apologize for going over and not having opportunity to talk to you guys about the dominant communication styles. So any questions for me?
If anyone has any questions, you can place those in the chat box. We do have a comment from Ashley Hatcher. She chimed in a little later on the assessment. She gave herself a 4, and she commented that it is so important to work as a team and build relationships with our families. And she commented that that was a great self-assessment tool.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I'm glad you found it useful.
And then she caught the 2 these, but it took her a minute.
Okay, that's great. I think I remember before I got started as an educator, like special education is like my second career. I felt a little awkward around someone with a disability, and I actually reached out to someone who had a disability, Johnny Erickson Tata. She had a ministry just helping people understand and knowing how to connect. And I asked her what to do, and she gave me like just a very simple directive, because there was someone at my church who had a disability and I wanted to connect. I just felt awkward, right? She said, just look him in the eye. Okay, is that not like an epiphany? So I looked him in the eye and just talked to him, as opposed to, it just enabled me to focus in on him, you know, and start that relationship.
Okay. If there are no other questions, I want to thank Ms. Fitz for her presentation.
Okay.
And if there are any other questions, we have about another minute. If you want to pop that into the chat box for Ms. Fitz, we still have a little bit of time. Okay, and I don't see any questions, Ms. Fitz, but again, thank you so much for your presentation.
You're very welcome. And thank you guys so much for being here. And I know you'll get a copy of this at a later date. So thank you.